The first thing Alistair thought about was the money. At 7 that morning, he'd left Palladium and marched to the Citibank ATM on Union Square. The total in his account was $600 and change, even less than he'd figured. If he'd known he'd have to flee the city and disappear, he would have been more economical in his spending. But you couldn't give a poor student $10,000 a month and expect him to be entirely shrewd, even if he's a finance major who's spent 4 years learning how to be shrewd, if nothing else. It seemed appropriate, in light of this, that he wouldn't even get his degree. When he'd returned to his dorm, cash in his back pocket, he'd stood dumbly in his room, wondering if he could overdraw his checking account. He knew he couldn't. Wondering if his credit card had a cash withdrawal option. He knew it didn't. Mostly he was buying time. Another thing he couldn't afford, until he had no choice but to accept the obvious. Before he left the city, he would have to pay a visit to Mark Landmesser and Elijah Pasternak, the couple whom he'd been sleeping with for the better part of a year and whose relationship he was all but certain he'd destroyed. The night before, after cutting his ties with Nikolai and accepting his final payment from him, Alistair had met up with the couple, hoping to mark the end of his dark days with mind-voiding carnality. Mark and Elijah knew little about Alistair's job, but Elijah had proposed going out to honor the occasion. In Elijah's mind, quitting a job was more of a reason to celebrate than getting one, and, given the unseasonably warm May air, Alistair had left his jacket, containing his last $10,000, on their couch. At dinner, though, rather than toasting him, Mark and Elijah fought. Fought like they never had. And after the bill had been paid, Alistair judged it too indelicate to return to their apartment for his cash. He figured he'd go back when the smoke had cleared. But when he returned to his dorm, he found Nikolai on the street, waiting for him, walking back and forth beneath the NYU flag. He told Alistair that the groundskeeper was dead, that they were surely next, and that they needed to vanish immediately. "Keep it on," Nikolai said, referring to Alistair's burner. "I will find you soon. I will come up with a plan. Oh, my friend." "Where am I supposed to go?" Alistair said. "You ask me," Nikolai said. "What do I know? This is your country, your crazy fucking country." Before Alistair could think to ask him for anything, Nikolai turned and walked off down the street. He still hadn't decided where he'd go. Their boss, Herve, had extended his operation far and wide, and he had people everywhere. Alistair's plan was to get on a Greyhound to California and get off at whatever place seemed halfway suitable for lying low. But no matter where he got off, he would need, he was sure, more than $600 in change. He paced his tiny bedroom in Palladium, 5 floors above 14th Street. He checked the time. 8:30. Too soon. He needed to head off any nosiness about his sudden departure, and if he called the men too early and asked after his jacket with undue desperation, they would certainly nose. Plus, having worked barely a day in their lives, Mark and Elijah tended to sleep late. He went to the window and looked up at the sky, into the windows of the office building across the street, down at the sidewalk. The day was bright, the century young, the city rich, the trees abloom. From below came the familiar, indecipherable din of cars, cyclists, buses, workers careering their way east and west, each trailed or preceded by a morning-long shadow, each figure appearing from Alistair's vantage happy, unguilty, free.